Embrace who you really are, son, and you will become a legend.
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Arey, and I am so excited to talk to you guys about Kraven. I didn't just hate this movie, I was offended by it. This is my least favorite of these Sonyverse movies by a mile.
Oh, it was worse than Madam Web?
No, Madam Web was a worse movie, but see, I don't care about Madam Web. I do care about Kraven the Hunter. I think Kraven the Hunter is one Spider-Man villain that would have been great to see on screen versus Spider-Man, and Sony Pictures squandered that potential. Like, I felt bad for the director, the actors, and the hundreds of people who worked on this film because they were given an impossible task to make a movie about Kraven without Spider-Man. Although I actually do think there was a way they could have made this movie good that I'll talk about a little later in the video when I'm joined by Matt Singer and Colton Ogburn. And I also want to remind you guys that we are currently running holiday sales at our merch store and we are selling tickets to our live show. Next month, we are going to be in LA, Texas, and Phoenix, Arizona, and I can't wait to meet you guys for live, exclusive breakdowns and all the Screen Crush fun. Now, in case you don't know the character of Kraven the Hunter, in the comics, Kraven is a renowned hunter who has traveled the world chasing all sorts of game. So he decides to hunt Spider-Man. But after Spider-Man defeats him, Kraven cannot live with his defeat and he becomes obsessed with him. One of the greatest Spider-Man stories of all time is Kraven's Last Hunt, where Kraven actually beats Spider-Man, takes his place, and then later on kills himself. I'm telling you guys, as a decades-long fan of these characters, this movie really hurt. I almost walked out several times during this film. Watching this movie was the cinematic equivalent of getting a wedgie and being thrown into a locker. I felt bullied by people who don't care about superheroes or comic books and had no interest in making a superhero comic book movie. The people who made this movie, sorry, the executives who made this movie fundamentally do not care about us.
So what made the movie so bad?
Well, first of all, this movie is like filled with great actors, Academy Award winners even, and yet I have seen more on-screen enthusiasm during Zoom calls. Russell Crowe seems to be having a good time. I mean, he got to do a silly Russian accent for a few weeks and then bought a boat with his money. But man, Ariana DeBose is a great actor. She's one of my favorites in Hollywood right now. Someone has to get fired for putting her in this movie. And Aaron Taylor Johnson, who is also very talented in movies like Fall Guy, was incredibly miscast. Kraven is supposed to be this older, grizzled man, but this is just like a good-looking Hollywood actor. He looks pristine in every single shot. You never feel like anybody is in actual danger or that these are actual people. So let me walk you through what actually happens in the movie. The opening of the film is actually pretty cool. It's like all online, so I guess I can talk about it, but I will be spoiling the rest of this movie in this video. It opens with Kraven breaking into a Russian prison specifically to assassinate a gangster who is under high guard. And like when that sequence was over, I thought, geez, man, right after this, if they could just cut to like Peter Parker doing something mundane like paying his rent, then that would be a really good start to a Spider-Man movie. But remember, Sony isn't allowed to use Spider-Man in these movies because they've currently loaned him to the MCU. And this is how we got, you know, like this line.
Has to do with Spider-Man, I think.
And then the movie sends us into what feels like a 40-minute flashback with young Kraven, his dad, and young Chameleon, and the dumbest origin story of all time.
Oh, what's his origin story?
Well, he's on a hunt and he makes like a connection to a lion, kind of like Jacob imprinting on that baby in Twilight. And then his dad spooks the lion, it attacks baby Kraven, and then like Calypso shows up and puts some drops of a potion her grandma gave her into his wound. And after this, Kraven has powers like an animal, which come and go depending on what's actually going on in the story. And then we flash forward about a decade and Kraven is killing poachers and gangsters. I guess because his dad, played by Russell Crowe, is a gangster?
Well, then why not just kill Russell Crowe?
Yeah, man, I do not know. Nothing in this movie makes sense.
A person? Person?
I was just trying to get up on the roof.
Person!
What?
Were you thinking about Die Hard again?
Yeah. Did you know that Alan Rickman really messed up his knee on a fall and that's why he's limping when he first meets John McClane?
I did not know that because I have never seen Die Hard.
How have you never seen Die Hard? Die Hard is the seminal Christmas movie.
Yeah, but every time I try to watch it, it's not on any of the many streaming services that I am paying for.
Oh, dude, I totally feel that frustration, believe me. You already subscribe to a dozen streaming services, but the one thing you want to watch is not streaming on any of them. But here's the thing, guys. That show or movie probably is streaming on one of your services, but just not in the United States. Like the entire Die Hard franchise isn't on Disney Plus in America, but it is in the UK. So you can use NordVPN to change your IP address to the United Kingdom, and there you have it. You can rewatch all kinds of R-rated movies on Disney Plus without having to pay for another service. Like, look at this. You can watch Die Hard, Alien, Planet of the Apes, and this also works for Netflix. So I'm telling you guys, stop overpaying for all these streaming services.
Don't tell me what to do.
And right now, NordVPN has a great deal through our link below, nordvpn.com/ScreenCrush. When you sign up now, you get a huge discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 additional bonus months for free. NordVPN has so many different features, and that's why I've been a loyal NordVPN customer for years. You can add up to 6 devices on your account, and you can use it on mobile, TV, or your desktop. For instance, they also offer threat protection, which deletes shady downloads before they finish. And their ad blocker is so great, it is the only ad blocker that I use. So save yourself some money, keep yourself protected, and help support our channel by clicking the link below to get a special discount on a 2-year plan plus 4 additional bonus months for free at nordvpn.com/screencrush. Now back to what I was saying. Kraven hunts gangsters, which puts him up against the Rhino, who is just like an ordinary guy with a condition that turns his skin into armor if he doesn't keep a knapsack full of medicine on his back at all times. Then, blah, 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 something, something Kraven, you know how it goes from here.
He fixes the cable.
Now I want to talk about the many things I hated about this movie. I love comic books, and I love comic book superhero movies. Those movies gave me a thrill because I got to see these comics put on screen. Like there's a brief shot in the Avengers during the Battle of New York when Captain America is running, and it's like a side-scrolling shot, and it looks like a comic book brought to life. That shot, for just a few seconds, made me feel like I was inside of a comic book. This movie is the opposite of that feeling. It made me feel like I was dumb for ever liking comic books to begin with.
That's deep.
Like, there are a lot of things in this movie that people who don't know anything about superheroes would think just have to go in a superhero movie. Like the Kraven cave with hidden gadgets everywhere, or his origin story, or like the love interest. But none of this is done with any kind of zeal or imagination. The whole thing just feels like a paycheck. It's so obvious that Sony Pictures was desperate to hang on to their IP, and they will greenlight anything, praying to accidentally make a franchise that somehow makes them easy money. There's even one moment where you briefly see a Daily Bugle headline, like it's designed like the Daily Bugle from the Raimi movies, and you can like hear the people in the boardroom going, hey, what about a newspaper? Spider-Man worked at that newspaper, right? Put a newspaper in there. That kind of Easter egg that has nothing to do with the actual character or the universe is offensive to fans and professional fans like myself. This whole movie feels like it's closing time at the bar, and Sony Pictures is desperately trying to hook up with us without ever bothering to even ask us anything about ourselves. So Sony, if you want to make a Spider-Man universe, and if you're not sure if we would like a Kraven the Hunter movie or not, before you waste $100 million, just ask us. We'll tell you when it's a bad idea. See, we don't want these movies to be bad. We want to see great comic book movies. We want to feel like we are in a comic book. But the something to do with Spider-Man, I think, universe isn't about making good movies with compelling characters and new kinds of stories that excite the imagination. This universe is only about making money, and you can't have mine. So, here to join me are Matt Singer, editor-in-chief of ScreenCrush.com and authors of such books as Opposable Thumbs, the story of Siskel and Ebert, and of course our very own Colton Ogburn, who is trapped eternally in a television but doesn't know it, so please don't tell him. Guys, I need your help. I desperately need help. Matt, what did you think of Kraven the Hunter?
Well, it's certainly a movie. I guess I would say that it is maybe marginally better than some of the other Spider-Man adjacent Sony Marvel movies, but that's damning with faint praise, the faintest of praise, really. You know, like it's
Singer raves. Kraven's marginally better than Madam Web.
It's almost a movie this time. No, it is. I would say for the most part, at least until sort of I think the last act, like it adheres to the contours of an actual movie. Like it doesn't feel so just like thrown together and futzed with and re-edited and reshot the way something like a Madam Web or a Morbius did, where it barely felt like a movie. Most of this feels like a movie. There are characters, there is a story, things happen. It's really only in
ScreenCrush.com hails. Most of this feels like a movie.
You know, hey,
I'm sorry.
You're stealing my bit from Critics Are Raving. I mean, we used to do whole videos where this would have been the perfect one for that.
I used to love doing those videos. I know. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm just hearing you. Yeah, sorry. Continue.
No, it's just it's really only in I thought in the last act where the whole thing really just kind of turns into one of these like Sony Spider-Man movies where it's just a boatload of nonsense and really ugly character designs and things that don't really make any sense. So, you know, is it good? No. Is it worth seeing? No. Is it boring? Sometimes. I don't think it is as disastrous as some of these other ones, but that's about the best I can say for it.
Yeah, Colton, like I said earlier, and Matt, I know you're a huge Spider-Man fan. You literally wrote a book on Spider-Man. Again, something to do with Spider-Man, I think universe is driving me crazy. And I know we did talk about this yesterday on our talkback, Colton, about how Sony's finally apparently ditching plans for villain spinoffs. But still, though, as a comic fan, I mean, what did you think of this?
Well, look, I mean, like Matt said, yeah, it was better than Madam Web and Morbius. That's not really saying much. I thought it was far worse than the first two Venom films, probably. You know what? I'll say it was better than Last Dance. I enjoyed this movie a little bit more than Venom: The Last Dance, but that's about as far as I can go with praise. I thought I'd give a peek behind the scenes and just read off my notes.
Okay.
That's about...
I have some of those to reference too.
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to hear yours because you shared some with me earlier and they were quite
yeah,
funny.
and I talked about them earlier in the talkback too. I'll just show this one, which I was pretty happy with. It just
I believe that one
me.
says "kill me." Yeah.
It does, yeah.
All right.
Raves Ryan Airy.
Please feel free to jump in where you would like. My first one is, this movie gets especially bad when the characters talk. Like any scene, when the characters begin to speak, I was just like, oh, can we move on to the next, like, decent action set piece? So the dialogue, absolutely awful. Delivery of the dialogue, absolutely awful. It felt like it was made in 2004, but not in a good way. All of these Sony movies feel like they were just plucked out of the early 2000s, like when they were still trying to figure out how to make comic book movies. So I feel like if this movie had come out then, maybe I'd be a little bit more forgiving. I could totally see my like 6-year-old self digging this movie. But yeah, just it doesn't work today. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel with the villains. There are villains in this movie that I have never even heard of that are like from the comics. The Foreigner, yes. I don't take your phone out in movies, folks, but I did take my. I'm like, who the is the Foreigner? I had no idea who the Foreigner was. Chameleon.
Chameleon? What? No, the Chameleon would have been the villain for it.
No, I've heard of Chameleon. I'm sorry.
Right,
new note.
Amazing Spider-Man 1. But like
looked terrible. Looked terrible. Like
in
horrifying.
The last 30 seconds he was in the movie when they actually showed the Chameleon.
And not in a good way. Like the face they did, oh my god. And when he turns around and he's like the little person Wolverine, but he does the Aaron Taylor Johnson face. I was trying to contain laughter.
I was at the world premiere for this movie, right? And at the world premiere, I went to the bathroom, and as I was going to the bathroom, a lot of the people, I won't say who, but there were like Hollywood people there and a couple of the actors, and the looks on their faces.
You should see the look on your face right now.
It was like they were leaving a funeral, man. And whatever, like everybody makes bad movies, good movies. There's a reason this was delayed for so many times, man. Like, Matt, where do you think Sony can possibly go from here with this? Like, since the Dark Universe, I don't think we've seen a franchise. This is worse than Dark Universe because they spent actual real money on the movies instead of just saying they were going to make the movies.
Yeah, this whole Sony's Spider-Man universe has been such a boondoggle from the very beginning. And I mean, the problem is right there in the title. Sony's Spider-Man universe. Well, guess who doesn't appear in any of these movies? Spider-Man!
Spider-Man, right.
Spider-Man!
But Matt...
They do have something to do with Spider-Man, I think.
There are very vague references to Spider-Man.
Like Kraven's worst fear apparently is spiders. But again, as a comic book fan, I know I talked about this earlier, Kraven's Last Hunt, right, is one of the seminal pre-Dan Slott Spider-Man stories. I think that is one that if you're going to do that story, that would have been amazing to see with Tom Holland. And Jeffrey Dean Morgan, for example, is Kraven, or any number of like great actors from Europe who could have done this. But then they take Aaron Taylor Johnson, and he's a Russian who goes to school in America, so never has any trace of a Russian accent. But his dad not only speaks in a broken Russian accent, but at the end leaves his son a note written in English that's also spelled out in a broken Russian accent. Like, there's so many little things in this where I was like, if this movie would have recognized what it was, right? If it would have been camp, like I was saying earlier, I think it would have been great. But I kind of look at it and go, I don't even know who this was for. Who was this for?
Why didn't they do Kraven the Last Hunt, but do it with Venom? I understand they can't use Spider-Man. They're setting up this interconnected universe. Why not have Kraven hunting Venom in San Francisco? That would have been a
Amazing.
far cooler movie, but
Did I think he play Spider-Man
that'd be too
too?
much to ask. Play Spider-Man 2? Yeah, I've played some of it. Yeah.
Craven's amazing in it, and I think that really
Isn't-
diminishes this movie even more. Go ahead.
Yeah, isn't that kind of the plot line there? Doesn't he like hunt Venom kind
Essentially,
of in
yeah.
that game?
Other
Yeah.
things too, but yeah. And it's amazing. Craven is this person who is so imposing and huge that he would have made Tom Holland, like it's like Little Mac fighting the characters in Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Go ahead.
But one thing they had going for them in this movie was they had the R. They had the R rating, but I feel like they barely used it. They just said fuck a lot and said it in Russian, and then there'd be like the cool like bear trap scene. Why wasn't that the whole movie? Deadpool and Wolverine was more violent and gory than this movie. I feel like they could have had fun and like gone the Terrifier route and just made it ridiculously bloody and gory, almost to like, to the point that it's kind of funny. Like that's what they should have done, and they took themselves way too seriously.
The
And
newest
my
episode
last
of
note
Creature
that
Commandos is more bloody. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, the ADR was awful. Not as bad as Madam Web, but the ADR scenes just complete. The scenes where they re-record certain dialogue and they cut to like an exterior
It's very
shot.
obvious.
Oh my god!
I will at least defend the kernel of an idea here of making, it's basically like almost Succession with a family of supervillains. Like that's really what it could
That's
have
fun.
been.
Sure.
On paper, like if you strip out everything else, that's almost what it is. You have Kraven and Chameleon and the dad, and they have this very complicated, thorny relationship. The brothers they sort of get along, but neither one gets along with each other in the context of the dad. The dad is getting older. He wants them to be warriors and hunters and in the world of the thing.
be a man.
You must be
I
a
pour
man.
the vodka on the bullet wound and throw the bottle gently over there to the stagehand just off screen.
There is predators
Yeah.
and there is prey, and we are the predators. And oh yes, it's almost Triumph the Insult Comic Dog, I guess, when you do it that way.
Hey,
but
props
it's
to
the
Russell
idea.
Crowe.
I think the idea, if that really was what they went for, I think actually that's kind of a fun idea. I don't think, I'll push back against Ryan saying Kraven is a really cool character. I don't even know if he is.
I think he is.
I think if you make a list of the greatest Spider-Man
He's a great
villains.
villain.
No,
Yeah.
if you make a list of the greatest Spider-Man villains, he's definitely not in the top 5. He may not be in the top 10. He is
Not in the top 10. You're crazy. No, he
I could
definitely
easily
make the top 10.
I could easily pick 10 villains that are more interesting than Kraven right off the top of my head. Okay, let's put
Go.
that
You
out.
could, in your
But-
opinion, right?
In my opinion.
But you also have to admit, taking Kraven and making him a conservationist is like taking the Green Goblin and having him rob banks to give money to poor people.
Right, but
You know
that's
what?
I
I'll
was-
defend.
That's what I was
I'll
going to say.
defend
The
that.
things that make him interesting are, like so many of these characters, how he functions in context with Spider-Man, in counterpoint to Spider-Man. The things that he represents that are different than Spider-Man, even though the characters have some superficial similarities. So when you take him out of that, you put him in this storyline where, okay, it's sort of going to be like, we have this sort of vague succession-y idea about this criminal family. Okay, but then, instead of making like a movie that actually is about that, that's maybe 20%, 15%. Russell Crowe's barely in the movie for long stretches. The Chameleon is barely in for long stretches. And instead, you have like these sequences with the Foreigner, with the Rhino, who is so ridiculous and terrible looking, and really does have the
Christ,
vibe of
yeah.
one of those early 2000s. We barely know how to get the technology wrapped around these characters.
It made me long for the days of Paul Giamatti Rhino.
It actually is. The Paul Giamatti Rhino is better for sure. Is a cooler looking character than the Rhino in this movie, no question.
And Matt, I want to say, I never thought Kraven was a good character on his own, but he's a great contrast to Spider-Man. If he was a great character on his own, this would be a good movie. So, sorry to cut
Ryan,
you off.
I have a direct quote from you here. Kraven is the best Marvel character ever made.
I
So
heard
that's-
you say
that's
that
what you
too.
said,
I also
like, a few
heard you
minutes
say
ago.
that.
Yeah.
You did say that.
And we just cut it out of this video so the proof wouldn't get out to the public. It's all a conspiracy. Birds aren't real.
Yes.
Colton, what did you think of Russell Crowe's performance in this film?
Yeah, Russell Crowe played Kraven, to talking about the comic book,
did.
version of Kraven. He was Craven. Look, Ryan, you said when we were talking earlier, you mentioned good for him. He probably got a boat out of this, like with his paycheck. Good for Russell Crowe. Yeah. Look, there were so many cool things that, like, just in this talkback that they could have done, like with Chameleon and, like, to your point about the family dynamic. What if we had found out, like, the main villain of the film, instead of going the Rhino route, have it turn out that, oh, it was his brother the whole time and he was Chameleon.
Yeah.
And for God's sake, give him the ability to transform his body as well.
Yeah.
The face.
What I was thinking is all the way through the movie, I thought, okay, his brother's the Chameleon. So she kidnapped herself, dude. I thought he was going to have kidnapped himself or something like that. And I thought in the last 5 minutes of the movie, that's when it got interesting. When you had this actual character reason for these two to have a dynamic together. Go ahead, sorry.
Well, and what a weakness and an Achilles heel for Rhino, that he just can get stabbed in his little hole there.
Yeah.
That was
or
so
you can take that
ridiculous.
medicine and pour it on him, and that apparently gets rid of his superpower.
Well, and I just wanted to say, going back to your point about making Craven a conservationist, I hated this movie, okay? I think it was absolutely terrible. I am so glad to hear that they are, for the love of God, I hope, not going to make any more of these movies. But if you're going to make a movie with Craven as the good guy, nobody likes a poacher. Nobody likes a trophy hunter. So I kind of do appreciate that they took the angle of, yes, he's the hunter, but he's not, a big old P-word going out there shooting lions. He hunts bad guys. So he hunts man.
The most dangerous game of all.
I'll defend that slightly. But
Fine,
yes, it is pretty much a character
I
assassination.
did think, though, in those last few minutes, right, that I was like, well, this Chameleon relationship is by far the most interesting thing the movie's done. And this idea that his brother could have been manipulating him and making him think he was kidnapped, or he was the one behind the Rhino. But the movie doesn't even have any interest in being that clever. It's just there so everybody can get paid. And I'm so happy for all the people who got work. At the beginning, the director came up, talked about all the thousands of crew members, and I was like, great, I'm glad they got paid in an era where theaters are suffering. I don't think this movie gives any hope to the cinema industry for people to come out and keep watching movies together, unless, of course, it's on a bet or a dare, or you're like super drunk or something.
Yeah.
I even noticed, Matt, did you catch that when they... when they first it was good to laugh at times. If I didn't see the potential of Craven as a Spider-Man villain, I think I would have thought this movie was hilarious. In the first scene where Calypso's introduced as a teenager, did you notice that her grandmother
they called her Calypso 18 times? Yes.
18 times, and then they kept doing it when she was older. Aaron Taylor Johnson kept doing it. They went through and said, a focus group said people don't know her name, so let's get that in there.
Wait, that was Calypso?
That was
Calypso, yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
Calypso,
I didn't catch
Calypso.
that.
Come here, Calypso. Look at these cards, Calypso. Calypso, this is our magic
I
potion.
completely missed that.
Yes.
Even things like Aaron Taylor Johnson breaking into a prison, which, by the way, was a cool sequence. The way he got into the prison, it's a good introduction to the character. I was kind of on board at that point. But then how he goes into assassinate a Russian mobster but doesn't cover his face when he leaves so the cameras can catch him. And then he's surprised when people find out that he's Craven.
And I hated him having superpowers. The lion blood dripping into his body. I still don't think I fully understood what was in that vial. I didn't completely get that. And I started to kind of question it. And then I went, it doesn't matter. And it just went away.
So to get superpowers, all you have to do is be mauled by a lion, step one.
A legendary lion.
Let the lion drip a little bit of blood into your blood, step two.
Directly into the bullet hole.
Into the wound.
Yeah. Into the wound.
And then voodoo priestess has to pour some magical elixir.
Calypso.
Her name was
I forgot her name. I forgot her name too. Has to pour her magic potion into your mouth at the exact same time. That's all it takes. Those 3 steps. Simple as pie.
And apparently Calypso's grandmother knew that Calypso had to do this for some reason because the 3 tarot cards she put... I learned a lot about tarot from Agatha all along. You can't do a read with 3 tarot cards, right? But she did, but Calypso's mother did that to help Calypso in the future.
Whose mother?
Calypso's grandmother,
Calypso.
actually.
Calypso.
Sorry,
Oh, okay, grandmother.
I misspoke.
Of Calypso,
I misspoke.
gotcha.
There was a frustrating thing too when I was leaving the theater because I turned to Lee Mazzio, our editor and junior writer, at the end, and I said, I do think there's a way you could have done this movie and had it be fun. If this movie would have been made in 1986 and directed by somebody like John McTiernan, right? If they would have taken that R rating, because I was also like, wait, he's in this jungle with Ariana DeBose, who normally I love. He's in the jungle with her, and they're R-rated, but they're not hooking up, right?
Oh my God!
Violence
Thank
and
you for
porn.
saying that.
And I was like, this is the kind of movie that if they would have gone, hey, you know what? No CG. We're just going really old school, down and dirty 80s action movie. I think this premise would have been so much fun. But to your point about the powers, it made him too powerful, right? They try to bring in the foreigner and his hypnotism with this weird stuff, but Kraven, like in the comics, Kraven walks around with a giant cat. The reason he walks around with a giant cat isn't because he talks to cats. It's because walking around with a giant cat when you don't talk to cats is an insane thing to do. And it shows how he is fearless. But in this case, because he has no reason to be fearless. He's so cocky and arrogant. I'm the best. I'm the fastest. Why do you care about a guy like that? Why? There's nothing about him to ever make him feel like a relatable protagonist. And we're just supposed to be into the character because I'm the hunter. Remember, he says that quite a bit, too.
It was so weird they didn't hook up.
I felt
Yes,
yeah.
it was.
There was definitely there
wait,
had
hook
to
up
have been
with
with Calypso.
Calypso.
There had to
Calypso,
have been a
sorry,
scene.
yeah.
There had to have been a scene or even more cut out there.
But again, I do think that with a little bit more vision and a little bit more creativity, and maybe if people would have walked into this realizing what they were walking into, I think it would have been a success. But to your point, Matt, about Madam Web, we were talking about the lines that were cut and things like that and silly lines. I was thinking about like how Sydney Sweeney and the other cast members were tweeting, oh my God, we're part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I kind of feel like this thing for for actors who aren't nerds and don't know what they're talking about, they might even hear, oh yeah, cool, I'm going to be in a Marvel movie. Now, Aaron Taylor Johnson obviously knows different because he was in the MCU and he's playing a different character. But man, this idea, I think this is finally the end of it. This idea that if something's a superhero or a Marvel, you can easily make money from it. And it's like printing money. And like we talked about a couple of days ago, dear God, I hope that Sony is done with this. Matt, what are your thoughts? We didn't get to talk to you about this yesterday. What are your thoughts on the Wrap reporting that Sony has no plans to continue their something to do with Spider-Man, I think, universe?
I mean, I'm a little surprised it took them this long to get to this point, just because it's so obviously a bad idea. Like, I don't have a problem with Sony, and I think they've done a really good job making Spider-Man movies, like the actual Spider-Man movies, the ones that they, generally their track record is pretty good. They've made some really great superhero movies with Spider-Man, live action and animated. They're great.
They've made the best Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man 2.
Right.
Best superhero movie, arguably, too.
I don't have it's not like I'm like, oh, well, Sony shouldn't make superhero movies. I totally don't think that at all. But I do think making that deal with Marvel where they would make the Spider-Man movies together and Spider-Man would be in the MCU, but therefore he couldn't actually appear in any of these other movies they were making was the ultimate, like, double-edged sword for them, because it doomed this Sony Spider-Man universe, then like muttered under your breath, without actual Spider-Man, he can't actually be in these movies. It's not going to show up.
Right. You can show spiders in the trailer, but you can't show Spider-Man. Right.
Exactly. And so it's just a bad idea. If you're going to make a Spider-Man universe with Spider-Man in it, great. I'm all for it. I love Spider-Man. But to make an entire universe of movies built around a character who cannot legally appear in them is just a bad idea. I don't know any other way to put it. And after, I think, 5 of these movies? 6 of these movies? Whatever it is, I haven't seen any evidence otherwise.
6. Venom, a little bit. I mean, Tom Hardy knew how to carry it, but when I watched Venom, I thought, gee, I hope this doesn't make any money because they're going to double down on this. And lo and behold, I'm just glad they're going to cut this off before we get a Man-Wolf movie. That's kind of where I thought this was all heading toward. Well, guys, we got to cut it off there, but I could do this all day. Matt Singer, your review for Kraven the Hunter is up on ScreenCrush.com right now. Colton, you can find him here on the channel. All of our socials are linked below, but we want to know what you guys think of Kraven and about Sony's Something to do with Spider-Man, I think, universe down in the comments below, or add any of us on our socials or in our free-to-join Discord. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe, smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.